Leading group trips and running a tour company can be a smart way for travel bloggers to monetize. You're already creating travel content and inspiring your audience to explore. Why not invite them to travel with you in real life? And the best part is, you don't need a massive audience to make this work. To prove it, I've brought on my friend, fellow creator, and tour leader, Brittany Roberts of Traveling Teachers. She sold out her very first group trip with a small audience. She had less than 300 page views at the time. And since then, she's been leading incredible group trips around the world, from Ireland to Croatia to Puerto Rico and beyond. Brittany is also an active member of my Travel Blog Prosperity membership community, where she is constantly sharing really helpful tips about leading group trips, among other things. So I asked her to put together this short workshop to help you do the same. Now, just 2 quick notes before we get started. If you like this idea of free mini workshops, make sure to subscribe, as I've got other guest experts as well as my own trainings lined up. Also, I've created a free hosting group trips cheat sheet to pair with this workshop. It's included in my free travel blogger resource library, linked in the video description or via the QR code on your screen. Inside, you'll get access to 75 plus resources, all meant to help you grow your traffic, email list, and income. Feel free to even pause this video to go grab the free cheat sheet and other blogging resources. You back? Then let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to my session. I'm so glad you're here watching this workshop. In this short session, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I filled my first group trip with a small audience. That's the title of this, but honestly, the title should be how I filled my first group trip with a tiny audience, because that is what I had. I had fewer than 3,000 people in my Facebook group. I had a podcast that basically nobody was listening to. My blog had fewer than 200 page views a month. And honestly, back then, I wouldn't have even been able to tell you what a page view was. So that's where we were at. But I did have a community. And what I'm hoping to show you throughout this session is that there's a big difference between growing an audience, building an email list, and creating a community. I do think you need to have all three, but they are all very different. And I hope this reassures you that even if you don't have a huge audience yet, or even a big email list yet, you can totally do this. You can host group trips. It has been amazing for me. The first year that I decided to host group trips, I ended up hosting 4 back-to-back because they kept selling out. And so I kept adding more on, which was risky in itself. And in that 1 4-week period, we had 4 sailing trips booked in Croatia. I sold about $40,000 in travel, and my profit would have been about $10,000, except for I wanted to add some special things in. So I took a little bit from that, and I ended up paying 2 people to host the last 2 weeks for me, which is really how you grow and scale if you do want to turn group trips or tours into a full-time business, which I don't know if I'll be able to get into that today. I want to go back to that first trip and talk about how you can do this with a tiny audience, because that's what I had. And even though I did have a tiny audience before I was a travel agent or knew about marketing or anything else, I did have a community of teachers. I was a teacher myself. I was living and working on a reservation. I wasn't really around other people who were traveling as much as I was, but every single summer, I made a point to travel between 2 to 12 weeks a year. I felt very privileged I was able to do that, and I wanted to share about my travels and all these opportunities I was finding, ways that teachers could travel for free through grants and fellowships, other things like that. But I just wasn't in a place where people were interested. So I built a community that I truly wish existed. And I'll talk more about how I did that throughout this session. But now I am kind of known for also doing this. So I run a brand called Travel Agent Haven. I coach over 100 travel agents personally, and I do this stuff myself, right? So I'm not just teaching it, I'm doing it alongside you. And every time I learn something new, I'm happy to share what I learned with the greater community. The first thing you really need to do, it's kind of a prerequisite, is to build a brand. And I'm sure you know this. You've probably heard before that you need to know who you're talking to. You need to know who your reader is, who your customer or client is. You need to know what problem you're solving or what specifically in travel you're doing. And all of those things are true. So I would say that having a brand is like your prerequisite. However, you also want to have a brand specifically for the group trips that you're hosting. I'm going to make an assumption that since you've never done this before, you're like, how do I even do that? So if you start to think about a group trip or a tour that you end up putting together as a product, as an offer in itself, then it really does have a brand and life of its own. If you think about some of the most amazing programs you've taken, things you've done, one really great example of this is certain events. I think about the Women in Travel Summit. It's a conference put on for travel creators every single year by Wonderful. I went to WITS twice before really even knowing who Wonderful was, what they did, what they do, and that speaks to the power of the brand that they've built for the Women in Travel Summit. Now, of course, Wonderful is an amazing brand as well, and you have to know how to do that. It's like practice, but your event, which is really what you're doing, you're putting on it in in-person event will have a life of its own. That is the goal. So you want for your brand to be separate from your blog, but complementary to it. Of course, I started with teacher trips because I was serving teachers. We had a sub niche of sailing Europe. We still do, but that's what I started with. I started with Croatia because the whole reason I started hosting trips was because the teachers in my community said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this together? And I said, let me go figure out how to do that, because obviously I'd never done it before. And so I put them together, but I would not have chosen Croatia myself as the first country. They were the ones who expressed interest in that. So if you've already had your audience or your email list, subscribers, your followers on Instagram, they're saying they want to do this with you, that is a great clue and a great tip that, okay, you're ready. Even though you don't feel ready, and you're not going to feel ready, and I'm always constantly learning still, even after doing this for 5 or 6 years now, you're going to be ready for your first one. I'm also known for soft adventure. I think sailing in itself is an adventure because it's just totally different from anything else that you would do. Everybody does everything, so everybody learns everything about sailing. I have also gone on a cruise to Antarctica. That was a lot of adventure for me, getting in and out of those little boats, the Zodiacs, which is very similar to what we do in sailing. I am not the extreme go in the backcountry for 18 miles girl. I've done that. I would do that personally, but I'm not going to go do that with a group of people. That is not my specialty. My specialty is connection, togetherness, friendship, which we'll talk about in a second. Food, fun, and friendship, but also food and wine and sense of place are really important to me. Working with small business owners, creating surprise and magic moments with locals, those are hallmarks of my brand for my trips that are an offshoot of what I do with traveling teachers. And some parts of the brand for the trips is also present in traveling teachers, and then also in my personal brand for myself. Relatable, attainable, personable, affordable. I want for these to be descriptors people use when they describe my trips. I want for people to come on my trips and meet the next best friend they're going to travel with. That is my goal, and it's been so cool to see that happen. So related to that, you have to create a community. Now, at the beginning, I said that there are 3 things you want to do when it comes to figuring out who you're talking to, right? You want to grow an audience, build an email list, and create a community. And while you're building your email list and growing your audience, you're also building a brand, right? There's a lot of stuff we have to do, but creating a community is different. And I would say that this is absolutely a requirement to be able to do group trips well. And I also don't think you should do group trips unless you want to be in a community and you want to host one, right? Like, you have to like people, which I feel like is a silly thing to say because maybe it's an assumption, but definitely don't do group trips and host events in person if you don't like people, because one, you'll be exhausted, because I'm exhausted and I do love being around people, okay? So you need to think about who you are. What does your energy look like? What do you have the capacity for? I have a very flexible schedule at this point in my life that might change, but for the last 6 or so years, I've been married, but I don't have young kids. I don't really have a lot of outside responsibilities aside from the other stuff I do. So do you have the flexibility? And if not, can you schedule things maybe once or twice a year, which I do recommend, by the way, for your first group trip, planning that one 12 to 18 to 24 months in advance, just because of how much there is to do. And I'm sure you've had that feeling of, oh my gosh, another year has gone by. That is especially true when you're planning a group trip. Okay, but let's talk about how I actually did it. How did I build a community, especially when I had such a small audience and not really a huge brand yet, right? I wasn't really well known. Facebook groups have been so clutch for me. I still use this. In fact, sometimes I go back and I'm like, why are there certain things that I was doing in the beginning that I don't do as often now when they work so well? So I'm definitely going back and auditing that. But going into other Facebook groups where my target audience is, where solo travelers are, because I have another brand offshoot for solo women traveling, for teachers, for digital nomads, I have these sub segments now. But going in Facebook groups and positioning myself as someone who knows what she's talking about when it comes to the destination. So Croatia, I have some really deep destination knowledge. I have recommendations of certain people and experiences that I don't even care if I get paid. I just need you to do these things and go visit these people when you go to Croatia. That's how much I love the country. I love the Balkans. I love the natural beauty. I just love it. And I want to share that with other people, but also the togetherness and the power of group trips. So I go in Facebook groups and I talk about that. And then of course, I have positioned my Facebook profile. If you go snoop on it, you'll see what I mean. I have it positioned in such a way that if someone goes and checks me out, and they do, they're going to see who I am and what I'm about. They're also going to see the call to action to join my Facebook group, which if they're on a computer, they will, which again, remember, I'm talking to teachers. Often they're on their desktop when they're using that. So that's something else you want to be thinking about. For the first like 2.5 years, I did not miss, I think maybe 2 weekly live streams, maybe 5 if we're going to be really generous. I was very, very consistent. I got to know people so well. I got to know their spouses and partners' names, their kids' names, their pets' names. I knew where they were watching and listening from. I would send them personal notes. Hey Maggie, thank you so much for coming to my live stream today. It was awesome seeing your name in the chat. How was your trip to Italy? So simple, but if you think about where we're going today in the age of AI and automation and how companies companies don't want to talk to their customers, if you are the one to do that, you will set yourself apart. All of these companies will talk about in their values, customer service, integrity, and all that. If you exemplify those things, you don't need to say you value them. People will just know it by the way you interact with them. Hand-raising posts are genius. I actually presented at the Travel Blogging Summit and I did this exact exercise with them. I'll walk through it with you very quickly, but basically all you do is you make a post. This could be via email, Facebook, Instagram, stories, doesn't matter. Hey, I'm thinking about hosting a trip in blank destination, blank month, blank year. The focus for it is wildlife photography, surfing, van life, whatever it is for you. I know I would need to get together 8 to 10 people to do this. Who would be interested in coming? You're not asking for anybody to make a financial commitment. You're just trying to gauge, is there enough interest? And this is important because one of the most frequently asked questions is about marketing. Well, if you can know in advance that you have people interested enough to book, then that's your green light to go ahead with it, right? So the hand-raising post is absolutely something you can do today. And if you go do it, come back on this video and comment whether or not you did it. And I know this is going up on Jesse's channel, but I will take a peek and I just want to encourage you if you do, because so many people will see this and they will not take action on it. I want you to be one of the few people who do. Number 3 is you have to launch it properly. And this is going to be with every single group trip, tour, product, service, whatever you have. You need to give it enough time. For your first one, 12 to 18 to 24 months in advance. People need to see and hear something over and over again, especially if it's your first one, because 1, they need to know that you're serious. 2, they need to just hear it and see it because we're also distractible. And 3, because of algorithms and stuff, not everybody sees everything that you're going to say. So give it the proper time, have a plan for that. Here's how I did that. I did personal invites. So anybody who was coming to my live streams in my Facebook group, engaging with my content, sending me messages, I personally sent invites out, probably hundreds to be honest. And if this is making your eyes go wide, I totally understand. It's not what most people want to do, but I'm telling you, if you're willing to do the things that other people are not willing to do, you are going to have the results that others will not have. I also got on the phone with people if they felt like it was too sketchy, if they had questions. So I was willing to get on the phone. I did Zoom calls, well, Skype back then. I did webinars and events, which I also highly recommend. I would recommend both the one-on-ones and the webinars, depending on how big your audience is. But I'm guessing if you're here, you don't have a huge audience yet. So you have the gift of time. And I know you're probably thinking, I don't have time. I know we all could use more time, but I mean in the sense of if you have 100,000 followers, it's so hard to be personal and do outreach like that. They can do it, but it's harder. You have the gift of being able to respond to every single person in a timely manner to prioritize their conversations. That means everything. And then when someone does book, ask them to invite a friend. This is amazing because you can sell to 20 people and get 40 bookings. And when I had that realization, it was like a light bulb moment went off. I started getting smaller groups within my groups. And that's one of the reasons I was able to fill out these first few spots so quickly. So I said, do you have somebody who wants to come, a partner, a friend? Especially with sailing, it was a legit thing that these rooms are so small. It's like the size of a tent when you're sailing. If you've been sailing, you want to know the other person, or you have to be adventurous to share with a stranger, right? Like it's your choice. And then you want to follow up. And I mean this, you don't want to bug people, but if someone has said they're interested, if they want more information and maybe they booked a call with you, they talked to you, they were keen, but they haven't put their deposit down yet, or they haven't paid for their spot yet, just follow up with them, especially if they did say they were interested. Now, if they don't respond back to you or they ghost you, that's another thing. But if they have been interested, they're probably just busy. You obviously are highly motivated to get this trip filled, but they're not, right? It's just another thing that they're looking at doing. Remember that, but then be top of mind. It's also good to let them know that you're thinking of them. I will go to someone's stories and respond to them there and just let them know, like, I'm also interested in them as a person, which I am, because they're not just qualifying you, right? They're not just trying to see if you're legit to go with. You're also trying to see, is this person going to be fun to hang out with? Are they going to get along with the other customers, clients, and travelers on the trip? Are you two going to jive well? There are so many things to think about. So remember that while you're following, you're also qualifying them. Here's the most encouraging bit though, I hope. It's the fact that you do not need thousands or even hundreds of people to say yes to you or to even be interested in your trip. In fact, you wouldn't even be able to support that many people most likely. Most small group trips are 8, 10, 12, maybe 25 to 50 people if it's a bigger group. So you really don't need nearly as many people to say yes as you might think. Okay, after everything you've done so far by this point, and by the way, I'm also saying this on top of actually planning the trip because I'm sure you know how to do that already. You're crafting itineraries, you're writing blog posts, you are a travel expert already. But now we need to make things official so that you can reduce your risk, limit any liability you could have, and just make sure that everybody who's coming knows shows that they're coming on a legit trip, which will also increase your conversions and therefore your sales for your first one. So how do we make it official? One of the most frequently asked questions I get about hosting group trips is how do you set it up? And how do I do this? How do I limit the risk? All the disclaimers here, I'm not a lawyer, an accountant, I don't even have an MBA or anything like that. But honestly, those things don't matter. You just need to know which pathway you're going to take. And then each pathway is unique. I teach the method of having a de facto tour company. Now, I do have a traditional multi-day outbound tour company, which means that we all end up in the same destination, not from that place. We experience something together, and then we all either return home or we move on to our next destination. That's an outbound tour company. There's also an inbound tour company where people come to you. Jessie Festa, who hosts this channel, she has an inbound tour company, and she actually has a pretty sweet course on inbound tour companies if that's something you want to look into, especially if you live in an awesome place where travelers are coming to you. But if you're here, I'm guessing you're more interested in either traveling with your people to a certain place or having them meet you there. So starting a tour company might be something you want to do. I know some people want to avoid this if they're really scared of liability. However, I'm going to say if you like knowing exactly what your details are going to include, and this is especially true if you have a specific niche, maybe you're super adventurous and people know you for van life, so they want to come and experience that with you for a week. Well, in that case, it might actually make the most sense to start your own tour company or white label, which means you go find another tour company and partner with them. More about that in a second. And then you get to choose exactly where you go, what you do, how you do it, which suppliers or vendors you use, and you get total control over the experience. However, it does mean you have more risk and liability on your shoulders, but it also means you have higher profit potential. So you kind of have to decide what's your main priority here. With a tour company, I know so many travel bloggers who have gone on to do this who have been successful, and this is what I did at first. I got an LLC, which is a limited liability company. That means you have a corporate veil between your personal finances and risk and then whatever the company has. You would likely want to get general liability insurance for your business. It might be something you want to look into if you haven't already. And then on top of that, if you're a tour operator, you'll want to look into tour operator liability insurance. Berkshire Hathaway and AON are really good ones to look into. Now, if you're like me and you host soft adventure or extreme adventure, then it's probably going to be a little bit harder to get insured. Since my trips are often over the water, we're using marine vessels, we're living on the boats for a week, it's a little harder to get that insured. So I've had to do some other things to mitigate my risk and add different layers in between them. One thing is being a travel agent. Again, more on that in a second. But liability waivers, can't recommend that enough. It is so worth it to just meet with a lawyer, even if for 1 or 2 hours, to get liability waivers hammered out, to figure out exactly what your business setup should be and what you need. Ideally, you want to go with someone who knows the travel space. I've heard really good things about Ment Law, MENT, have not personally gone with them, but that is one to look into. So I mentioned that there are 3 pathways, right? Starting your own tour company, partnering, or becoming a travel agent. And then there are some hybrids that fall under that. If you want to partner, one thing that many travel creators do is they go with a tour company like Legit Trips, Trova Trip, Tour Hero, and that's definitely an option. You could also instead choose to white label, like I mentioned before, where you find a DMC, destination marketing company or destination management company, where they have everything planned out. You could go directly to a tour company like Intrepid or Trafalgar or G Adventures and say, hey, what would be the rate? I've heard from the ones I've done research with, although this could change, right? It's usually about 10%. Remember, that's before taxes and cuts into your profits and things, right? So usually take home is about 7%. You want to make sure you have a really strong contract if you do this and very clearly defined roles. What are you responsible for? What are you bringing to the table business deal wise? And what is your backup plan? Because I have talked to many people who have gone with a company like this. They had the company pay for their flight, withdrawing from the potential profits they were hoping to make, and then they don't meet their minimum spots and now they owe money, and it's just a stressful position to be in. This is another reason I like the travel agent pathway, because it's kind of like a hybrid. I get to partner with a tour company, but my commissions are higher, sometimes double of what I would get by going directly, which is kind of interesting. But then I also get the added layer of protection and liability that the travel agency has, and I get to use their errors and omissions assurance policy on top of whatever the tour company has. So I have an extra layer of security, and that just makes me feel so much better. But then I'm still working with a tour company. I still get to choose what my experience looks like for them. And then I can also decide, okay, I know what my commissions are going to be per person. Let me decide how much of that I want to use for surprise and delight and to plan little special things for the trip, which I highly recommend doing, because even though we don't like to think of our fellow travel bloggers as competition, and I don't want for you to get too much in that mindset, you do want to be thinking how you can set yourself apart. Because if you have 2 amazing creators and they're both going to Machu Picchu and they're both amazing photographers, they're both adventurous, why should someone go with you? It's going to come down to a couple of things, right? right? The brand you've built, the personal relationship and connection you have with them, the community you've created, which when you create a community, it means that people are no longer there just for you. They're there for everybody else in the community. And that's the really special thing, right? And or any value add you have, right? So maybe you're an amazing photographer and they're going to leave with epic photos of themselves. Maybe you're doing basically like a workshop series where they're going to leave with better photography skills, or they're going to leave with so many edited images that you take of them while you're all traveling together. So you have to sit there and really think about what that looks like for you. And then finally, last but not least, for sure, you want to have a plan C, D, E, F, J, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, because anything can happen when you're traveling, which I'm sure you already know, but let's go ahead and times that by 10, because when you have 10 individuals traveling together, things can get messy and stressful pretty quickly. So you want to make sure you have an idea of what to expect, again, what your roles are, what you're providing the travelers, what you're responsible for, what you're not, and you want to make sure, I didn't even mention this yet, but that you know that you're good to go. One of the reasons I made the switch to planning most of my group trips like a travel agent was because I realized, wow, I actually don't have the visa and the authorization to operate in most of these countries I would like to go into, not to mention certain countries like Italy, Egypt, Bhutan, India. They've really locked down tourism there, understandably so, and I want to make sure I do right by the countries that are hosting us. It's just good to dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure you know what's required of you, but then also have a backup plan. And so for me, being able to defer as much liability and responsibility is my priority. I would rather have more flexibility and be able to just not be stressed. And when I go, I'm not really working, even though you could argue I am. I'm taking photos or building relationships or whatever. I really am a traveler. I want to be seen as a peer by the time we get there. And that's something that I've decided for myself. You might want to be the tour guide in control, and that's very different than being a host. So again, you want to know those rules. Some other tips to help you out for your first one: cannot recommend enough having a wait list for people who cancel. Just because somebody says they're interested and they seem really keen, even if they pay the deposit, that does not mean that they will end up going. Say you have 10 people, you've met your minimums, yay, you filled all those spots. I recommend having at least 10 people on your wait list, people who are interested, excited. Ideally, they've already paid the deposit, maybe even like a wait list deposit, and then as soon as someone drops off and cancels, you call them up right away, like on the phone. Hey, a spot just opened up, we'd love to have you. You have 72 hours or whatever it is to make the payment. You do want to put in some urgency, because if that person says no, you have to work your way down the list to the next person. You do not want to be caught 30 to 60 to 90 days out from the trip when you have to submit numbers and not have your minimums for so many reasons. But one big reason is many of these companies, especially if you partner directly with a tour company or with these companies that I mentioned earlier in the session, sometimes the per person rate is not set unless those minimums are made. So say you had 10 people, that was the rate, but then if you only have 8, the rate goes up per person. And it is so uncomfortable to go back to travelers after they've already paid and they're expecting to be done and then ask them to pay more. You do not want to be in that position. So I highly, highly, highly recommend actually reading through contracts, paying a lawyer for an hour. Sometimes wherever you're located will have a chamber of commerce, or they'll have affordable lawyers for business owners. Definitely check about the resources in your area, because this really is that important. You want to know the minimums and maximums for passengers. If you do have a lot of demand, like I did for that first set of trips, maybe it is worth it to add a second or third week. And that's definitely something you want to do once you repeat places, which I do recommend doing, because then if you go to one place and you paid for the flight there, which hopefully you're factoring that into your costs, if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 group trips back to back, that flight cost can be divvied up over 5 trips, if that makes sense, right? Versus you going and coming back with them. Now that depends on the experience you want to have. One of my clients actually travels with her travelers. She's from Kenya. She takes travelers from Iceland to Kenya, and she lives in Iceland. So she gets like 20 people together and they all fly over together, and that's part of the fun and the experience. It's like a slumber party on the plane. I love it. But that's a specific experience that she's designed, and she decided to go the tour operator route for that reason. So it is good for you to think about, what is the vision? Why are you wanting to host a group trip? And I will say, even though you can make good money, I think it's more important that you think about that you're deepening the connection you have with the people who've decided to follow you, who've decided to pay you. These people don't have to become your friends, but they should be people who you would be friends with, because you're going to be getting to know them and spending a lot of time with them, a lot in a very short amount of time. And then you always want to budget more for group trips than you would expect. Again, you want to be able to surprise and delight them. If you hear that they really are craving something and you don't find it anywhere, maybe when everybody else goes back to the hotel, you run out and try to find, whether it's like a Coke, like soda, something silly like that could mean the world to somebody because it shows you were listening. So surprise and delight, can't recommend it enough. Book I highly recommend, Unreasonable Hospitality, if you want to excel, if you really want to excel with this. Another pro tip is to launch your second trip on the first. So if you're not doing multiple rounds of one trip the first go, have your second trip ready to launch on the first trip. So by day 3 or 4, when everybody's having a really good time and they're excited, you have some kind of introductory offer for them that they can go ahead and book that at a beta member rate. So that way, by the time you open it up to the public or the rest of your community or list, you already have 3 to 4 people paid, and it builds more scarcity because you only have so many spots left. And then rinse and repeat. I know that so many other travel bloggers like myself, we want to go to all these different places and have these various experiences, but you really do become an expert when you iterate and reiterate and reiterate and refine and make it better and better. But then of course you can always add more on as you go. This is a long-term vision business that we're planning. You can scale so many different ways, but asking others to host is a great way. I am so glad that I did that on my first one before I even really knew what I was doing, because 4 weeks straight on the boat would have been a lot. Yeah, 2 weeks was perfect. 4 weeks would have been a lot for me. So know your limits, know what you want to have, and be thinking about when you're traveling with people who would be a good host in the future. You could do a revenue split with them. You could pay them a flat fee. Depending on how your community is, you might even give them a free spot if they're not guiding themselves. There are so many nuances to this, so it's something you really want to sit down and work out, because if they're a tour guide, they really should be paid for their time. But if they're just going to be a traveler and they don't really have to do anything, then yeah, so many, except for maybe wear a shirt and like greet people when they get there, then yeah, you could probably find many people willing to take that free trip. So you just got to think about it. And then finally, collaborative trips. Such a great idea, especially if you feel like your audience is super small. I'm collaborating with several other travel creators and bloggers for an Alaska group cruise. I'm also doing an overland Alaska trip before that and an overland Canada trip after that. And it makes it so much easier to fill the spots more quickly when you have a group. That's also amplified reach, more people seeing everything. You guys can share each other's posts, so I just highly recommend that. Thank you so much for watching my session. It means the world to me that you decided to watch all the way through. I'm so excited for you to fill your first group trip. Again, my name is Brittany. If you have any questions, seriously, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to come back and see what you ask.
Right now, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you feel inspired and empowered to create, launch, and sell your own profitable group trips. Don't forget to grab access to the free Travel Blogger Resource Library, linked in the video description or via the QR code on your screen. There are a ton of resources in there on growing your community and increasing your blogging profits, including a hosting group trips cheat sheet based on today's video. And of course, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future videos sharing these strategies for bloggers who want to turn their blogs into profitable full-time businesses. Happy blogging!